Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, and good afternoon and greetings to all the participants in this afternoon's discussion. I would particularly greet our two distinguished panelists located in distant lands, Lord Bhikkhu Parekh, my very old friend in UK, and Dr. Geeta Dharampal. She's also distantly located. Warm welcome to both of you. Welcome to Ambassador Nirupma Rao and other panelists, Ambassador Srinivasan, Mr. Ashok Malik, and of course, the author, Mr. Alan Nazareth. Having said welcome to all the participants, I think the first thing we could do is to perhaps release the book. And if that is agreeable to the author and all the panelists, I would suggest that please hold the book in their hand in such a manner that it will be visible to the participants, those who are viewing this program. May I request you to please hold the book so that it can be seen. Lord Parekh, perhaps you can't hear me. Lord Parekh, can you hear me? Ambassador Srinivasan, can you hear me, please? Dr. Dharampal, can you hear me? I think, Kailash, there is some issue here because two of our panelists can't hear us.
Sir, there is a bandwidth issue at their end, sir. So far, we are concerned, we have made all the necessary arrangements.
Anyway, the book, I think those of us who are hearing me, the book is a great pleasure releasing the book along with all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
But before I proceed further, can I again ask Lord Parekh, can you please hear me?
Could we telephone to him because he is?
I think there's an issue. And Ambassador Srinivasan? Ambassador Srinivasan also can't hear. And Dr. Geeta Dharampal, can you please hear me?
I can hear you, but your voice breaks quite often, and I can only see three people.
Okay. Kailash, see if we can, meanwhile, side by side, do something to rectify this, because then if half the panelists can't hear us, then it'll be a little difficult.
Right, sir, right, sir.
We shall to see what can be done.
Right, sir, right, sir.
I would then not take time because we are working within a particular time frame, and I would then proceed to speak a little bit about the author. First and foremost, let me mention that I'm a prejudiced person, prejudiced in favor of the author because Alan Nazareth and I joined service on the same day. He joined the Foreign Service and I joined the Indian Administrative Service. Went away to foreign lands, as it happens. And for a long time, we were not in touch. But then he got posted to Delhi, and we met again. And then at the senior position, he was visiting Delhi once in a while. Now, as the panelists would be speaking about the book, I would not speak about the contents of the book except to say that the author, Mr. Nazareth, has rendered service to the government of India in distant land, in different continents. He started in Tokyo, in Japan, then he went to Burma, Rangoon, nearer home, then to UK, then to United States, then to Latin America, then to South, and then to Africa, and back to Latin America, back to United States again. In between, he had a senior appointment in Delhi as the Director General of the the Indian Council of Cultural Relation, ICCR. This was during 82 to 85, which was ironically and significantly a very difficult period at home. So while Mr. Nazareth was organizing international festivals in UK, in USA, France, and also within India, we were having considerable turmoil. We had the Blue Star at the time. Then we had the assassination of the Prime Minister, and various things happened which created dissonance and imbalance. Then he proceeded abroad again, as it happens, after the home posting, and he served in various parts of the world with great distinction. I would venture to observe that his 3 years at DGICCR had enormous significance in terms of the influence this posting had on his mind, in terms of the significance and importance of cultural diplomacy, cultural relations, because in his subsequent postings, I find here and there in his book evidence of his using his old contacts and trying to deal with certain problems, even of a political nature, by exploiting his past contacts in the arena of art and culture, which were very productive and very useful, if I may say so. And the further evidence of this is his influence on posting at DGICCR, is that both in Mexico, where he was our ambassador, and in Ghana, and in Mexico and Egypt, where he was our ambassador, in both these postings, he brought out 2 volumes, India, Egypt, and India, Mexico, which are very significant publications. They trace out the long cultural, historical relation between the two countries, Egypt in one case and Mexico in another. Besides these postings, all of which he performed with great credit to himself and to his service and to the country, he was invited as a guest lecturer from time to time by various institutions, because he had meanwhile acquired a great deal of both knowledge and expertise in issues relating to peace, non-violence, harmony, and so on. Soon after his retirement in 1994, because of the influence that I'm talking about, one of the first things he did after retirement was to call on Mr. Ram Mohan Gandhi when he came to Delhi. And with him, he discussed possibilities of establishing an institution which could foster Gandhiji's ideals, Gandhiji's views, Gandhiji's philosophy, his morals, his ethics, and so on. And this resulted in Mr. Nazareth being the founder and the managing trustee of an institution called the Sarvodaya International Trust, which he established in 1995 with Justice Venkatachalaya, former Chief Justice of India, as the chairperson of this very important organization. Then, in the subsequent years, Mr. Nazareth spent a great deal of energy in expanding the activities of the Sarvodaya International Trust. I was at that time working in Delhi, in the Indian International Center, and he asked me to set up a Delhi branch of the Sarvodaya International Trust, and which was done. And for the next 7-8 years, I was looking after the Delhi branch of the Sarvodaya International Trust. I dare say that we did a good deal of work by getting together school children and sometimes young college children and people at large from the civil society, and to organize functions, cultural functions, literary functions, which projected and which dispersed Gandhiji's ideals and his philosophy. Amongst the various things that he did after retirement was, in pursuit of his objective to spread the Gandhian values, he wrote a wonderful book, A Gandhi Outstanding Leader, Outstanding Leadership of Gandhi, which some panelists would know, but others who are linked to this afternoon program may perhaps not know. It was translated into 12 Indian languages and 23 foreign languages, which is not something you can talk about other books. And this book is now known all over the world, if I can say so. To the European edition in 12 languages, the foreword was written by Mr. Gorbachev of the erstwhile USSR. So having said that, I would say that while others will speak about Mr. Nazareth's achievements in the arena of diplomacy, I would particularly emphasize that his contribution and all the effort he has spent in the last 26 years that he has been retired, like me, this work that he has done to spread Gandhian values, Gandhian philosophy, Gandhiji's teachings, I would say that this will outlive all that he may have done in 20 careers in the Foreign Service. This is really seminal work, great contribution. His other book on Gandhi is, as it happens, not so well known, but I was associated with the release of that book also, Gandhi's Soul Force. That is also fairly well known in India. I don't know how much of this book is known outside. And let me also mention that amongst the various credits that Mr. Nazareth has earned for all the good work that he is doing in the last quarter of a century since he superannuated, he was also awarded in 2007 the Youth Aunt Peace Prize for a lifetime service to the world, which is not a passing matter. This is a coveted prize which earlier has been awarded to world-renowned personalities, and I dare say that this was highly merited. It was something that he truly and richly deserved. And before I conclude, because we are working to a time schedule, before I hand over to Ambassador Nirupma Rao, I would say that the Foreign Service, perhaps, I do not know as of today, I'm a little out of touch, but perhaps gives those who serve in the Foreign Service, as compared to those who serve at home, better opportunities of reading, thinking, doing things which we are not able to do. By way of example, I would say that while Mr. Nazareth was organizing important events abroad or even at home at DGICCR, I was battling with the Khalistani movement in Punjab, the Blue Star, leading to the assassination later on of Longowal, subsequently Prime Minister Gandhi. But Mr. Nazareth had produced a very readable book, very easy to read. When he sent me the manuscript, I finished it in about 8.5, 9 hours. It is so readable, there is fluent, it is readable. And I would say that this book should be of great interest to all those who wish to get a little acquainted with how the Foreign Service used to work in the less troublesome days, the balmy days, in the early days of our independence, when no less than the Prime Minister, who was in charge of external affairs, he would himself interview those who are being inducted into the Foreign Service. Mrs. Nazareth and my other colleagues who served in the Foreign Service, when I joined service, were all interviewed by under Jawaharlal Nehru in the South Block office. Outer room occupied by Mr. Natwar Singh, and he was Under Secretary to the Prime Minister at that time. And one by one, he met all of them. So I would conclude by once again wishing the author good health and good luck in the years to come. And I'm sure this book will be widely read all over the world, various parts of our country. And before I hand over to Ambassador Rupma Rao, let me mention I'm very pleased to meet her after a very long time. She used to be a young officer in charge of the East Asia Division. And we used to battle long hours till late evening sometimes, working on holidays in the China study group with the various problems which you are seeing today have not left us. So, Ambassador Rupma, can I hand over the proceedings to you now?
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir, for your eloquent and gracious remarks, and also for remembering the days when we discussed China policy in the China study group. One cannot forget those times. Good evening to you all, and thank you for being here today. This is a very special occasion, especially for all of us who have spent our lives in diplomacy and foreign affairs. Now, we diplomats are often asked, what do you do in the Foreign Service? As if we live in a neverland of whiskey-marinated escapism, a kind of lagoon with flamingos flying over it. The Foreign Service, may I say, is certainly not a bird sanctuary for young men and women who enter its portals. So this book by Ambassador Nazareth is most timely because it illuminates a life well spent in diplomacy. It is a memoir that combines tact and intelligence, two of the fundamental attributes of diplomacy as I see it, in equal and abundant measure. And with this, he also, through this fascinating narrative, proves that he is blessed with what the Germans call Fingerspitzengefühl, that is the feeling that one has in the tips of one's fingers. In other words, the instinctive ability to assess the terrain and also the empathy that comes with years of cross-cultural communication. The successful diplomat is one who knows what comes first, what not to worry about, and what to concentrate on. He or she also knows that a diplomat's life is not about settling scores or notching them up. It was Anthony Eden who said once that it is often good diplomacy to resist a score. Diplomacy is about flexibility, of being capable of adjustment, about nurturing innovative ideas, literally thinking outside the box. So Ambassador Alan Nazareth's humanistic memoir and the account of his life exemplifies all this. And I'd like to, in fact, read a brief remark made by Mr. M. Rasgotra, our former Foreign Secretary, who said, "There is so much in this book that will delight, inform, intrigue, and enlighten readers about the ways in which Indian diplomacy engages with the world," unquote. So reading through this memoir, I felt that he understood, Ambassador Nazareth understood from the outset of his distinguished career in the Indian Foreign Service what has long been recognized, that The man who becomes intensely interested in what he finds in his diplomatic post, people, or landscape is the best diplomat. He or she, may I say, is a successful diplomat because the people appreciate his or her interest in them and trust him or her accordingly. After he has shown an enthusiasm for the local scene, he is in a far better position to represent his own country effectively. So it is appropriate that we are here to celebrate his memoir and to take encouragement and inspiration also from the stellar achievements of his diplomatic career. And besides that, as Mr. Vora just pointed out, his years in retirement, where he has been a Gandhian scholar who combines passion for Gandhian values with a deep reverence for the Mahatma. So therefore, it's an honor to moderate this discussion this evening between four very distinguished panelists on the subject of Ambassador Nazareth's book. I will briefly introduce them to you all. We have Lord Bhikkhu Parekh, the eminent British academician, author, scholar, and life peer, a member of the House of Lords, and also a recipient of the Padma Bhushan. Through Lord Parekh's career, he has been a champion of multiculturalism and racial equality. Among his publications, he's also authored a number of books on Mahatma Gandhi, in which he has analyzed Gandhiji's political discourse, his political philosophy, and also introduced the life and work of Mahatma Ji to a wide audience. Our second panelist is Ambassador T.P. Srinivasan, who has had a very distinguished career in the Indian Foreign Service. Mr. Srinivasan was the permanent representative of India to the United Nations in Vienna, Austria, and governor representing India at the International Atomic Energy Agency. He served in various world capitals, including Washington, D.C., Nairobi, Moscow, Thimphu, and Yangon, and also as Deputy Permanent Representative at our mission to the United Nations in New York. He is one of India's foremost experts in multilateral diplomacy. In retirement, he has written a number of books and also authored a number of op-eds in various newspapers and media outlets on foreign affairs. And also, he hosts, may I add, a very popular foreign policy-focused television program on Asianet television called Videsha Vicharam. Dr. Geeta Dharampal, our next panelist and a leading Indo-German academic, is a retired professor and head Department of History at the South Asia Institute at Heidelberg University. Her publications and research focus on topics ranging from pre-modern transcultural interactions between Europe and India, the maritime cultural history of the Indian Ocean region from 1400 to 1800, medical history, religious ritual transformations, the socio-cultural and political history of the colonial period in general, with a special emphasis on Mahatma Gandhi's movement of political and cultural resurgence, is what makes her background so exceptional and interesting. Her scholarship bridges literature, history and philosophy, and cultural and social anthropology, and her academic career has spanned continents. She's worked in Germany, India, and the United States. Our fourth panelist, Ashok Malik, is policy advisor in the Ministry of External Affairs in the Government of India. In this capacity, he works closely with the External Affairs Minister, the Foreign Secretary, and the leadership of the MEA. Prior to his current role from August 2017 to July 2019, Mr. Malik was Press Secretary to the President of India. The first person from outside the civil services to be appointed to the post, he was part of the President's core group of political advisors, and he functioned as his principal speechwriter and spokesperson. Before joining the government, Mr. Malik was Distinguished Fellow at the Observer Research Foundation, New Delhi, And he also has had a long career as a columnist and commentator in the media. The format of the discussion will be as follows. Each of our panelists will make their remarks. I request that these be of approximately 5 minutes duration per speaker, after which we will have a question and answer session of approximately 20 minutes. Thereafter, we'll have the pleasure of listening to Ambassador Nazareth make concluding remarks. May I therefore request Lord Parekh to offer his remarks, followed by Ambassador Srinivasan, then Dr. Dharampal, and Mr. Malik. Thank you very much. Lord Parekh, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much indeed. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, thank you, because I have not been able to hear you at all. I'm sitting here
Oh.
quietly for the last 20 minutes. Anyway, thank you so much for your introduction and for inviting me to say a few words in this panel on Alan's latest autobiography. I want to say something about autobiography and how it should be viewed and judged. Autobiographical writing is relatively recent in European history and also in India. When it first appeared in the 19th century, people began to wonder what it was like, and they thought that it was a form of biography, which is much older tradition. So autobiography was spelled as auto-biography or self-biography, as in German, and it simply was a biography of oneself, written by oneself, with the result that the nature of autobiography was completely misunderstood. The vices to which it was prone were ignored, especially three, and it can easily lead to self-glorification and narcissism. It can also be invasive, talking about people, friends, relations without their permission, and drawing them into one's network, and equally importantly, narrating events in one's life without relating them to how they have helped one's own evolution. Therefore, autobiography is about how I became me, how I started as a little one.
Lawyer. Huh? हाँ,
We're still having problems with sound.
इनका तो आ रहा है। ये जो बोल रहे हैं इनका तो आ रहा है।
Can I request Mr. Padmakaran to please sort this out, our technical expert? I had requested Ambassador Srinivas.
Just give me 1 minute to. Yes, thank you, Ambassador Nirupama Rao. Mr. Vora, Ambassador Alan Nazareth, Sri KPR Nair, distinguished panelists and friends. My presence at this celebrated online release of Ambassador Alan Nazareth's autobiography is testimony to the unfailing courtesy and disproportionate gratitude of the author for my humble contribution to the book. All that I did for the book was matchmaking between the author and the publisher and help in the design of the cover. I recall with gratitude how Ambassador Chinmaya Garakan introduced me to Sri KPR Nair several years ago, and it led to a collaboration between us on about half a dozen books. So I was simply continuing the tradition of one diplomat introducing another to the diplomat's publisher, Sri Nair. I'm glad that I got an opportunity to read the book, A Ringside Seat to History, before it was published, to contribute a blurb and to write the first review. I also had the privilege to have the Malayalam version of his book on Gandhiji released in Thiruvananthapuram. This is an exceptional matter, as I had not even met Ambassador Nazareth when we were both in the Foreign Service. He was just a part of the celebrated folklore of the Foreign Service at that time. I can be very brief, as I have expressed my appreciation for the book in my review, which was published on reddit.com.
Little bit, very loud.
Any problem?
No, go ahead, Ambassador.
Okay, I overheard.
No.
I was saying I can be brief, as I have expressed my appreciation for the book in my review, which appeared on reddit.com. I wrote that, and I quote here, the description of his career by Ambassador Nazareth in his elegant language, judicious choice of details, without ego or malice to anyone, shows that it had its ups and downs, triumphs and tragedies, and lucky and unlucky accidents. It is the story of stoic acceptance of twists and turns of life and making the best of every situation. The coincidence of the Dalai Lama's arrival in India on the same day as he joined the Foreign Service, the miraculous arrival of Mother Teresa at a cancer hospital in New York to heal his son, the fight against the virginity tests in the UK, his chase of the fugitive Jayanti Dharmateja all the way to Costa Rica, 3 coups in Africa, and devastating earthquakes in Latin America, his appointment as the cultural czar of India. All these make facts stranger than fiction. I congratulate Ambassador Nazareth on his life and achievements so far, which makes the book a monumental work. I also compliment his wife, Isabel, who played a major part in his life and in his autobiography.
Thank you, Ambassador Srinivasan. May I request Dr. Geeta Dharampal to please make her remarks. Over to you, Professor.
Thank you very much. I feel completely overwhelmed to be a part of this celebration of Ambassador Nazareth's life. It's his life that we are celebrating, and to have him present with us and to be in the company of such eminent people, I feel really completely overwhelmed. I would just say a few words, taking off from what I had said in the blurb, but maybe there were a few mistakes in the blurb, so I will repeat the correct version here. Ambassador Nazareth's riveting narrative, extending over 3.5 decades and spanning 5 continents, Asia, Africa, North and South America, and Europe, presents the reader with a tour d'horizon. And for me, it was really, I got to know countries that I'd never been to. And it's in an amazingly dynamic and deeply insightful way. It tells us of the tumultuous events unfolding in the global arena from the late 1950s to the mid-1990s against the backdrop and often entangled with the Cold War. Exercising the craft of diplomacy in masterly fashion, representing India as a cultural superpower, Pascal Alan Nazareth, as a man of all seasons, and I want to stress the all seasons, at home in the world, accompanied by his stunningly beautiful and empathetic wife, Isabel, bears bountiful testimony to India's ancient motto, Udhara Charitaram tu Vasudeva Kutumbakam, for the enlightened, all of humanity is one family. And yet what's even more amazing is that his autobiography doesn't end with his last posting as Indian ambassador to Mexico, but has an even more astounding sequel, as was mentioned by the previous speakers. For after furthering India's interests, both political and economic, as well as enhancing her cultural standing in the world, and retiring from the diplomatic service, Alan Nazareth dedicated his life to evangelizing India's civilizational, moral values and humanitarian precepts by focusing on the extraordinary personality of Mahatma Gandhi. And it was in this connection that I had the privilege to become acquainted with our ambassador personally, namely by hosting at the South Asia Institute, Heidelberg University, a book launch with a German translation of his first book entitled Gandhi's Outstanding Leadership in October 2016, so 4 years ago, more or less. And in view of the ongoing Gandhi 150 celebrations, it might be opportune to say just a few words about his special book, which was translated, as has already been mentioned, into 12 Indian languages and 23 global ones. And there is a reason why. Namely, that setting aside the stereotypical image of Gandhi as a saint, visualizing an elusive utopia, Mr. Nazareth judiciously projected him as a man who strove in the real world, full of tensions and contradictions, to achieve an outstanding correspondence between thought and action, to practice what he preached, and this against all odds. In the process, during the course of his life, Nazareth traces how Gandhi effectuated the feat of negotiating a number of divergent roles, namely as a creative thinker, a political leader, a social reformer, all the while being a deeply religious person. This is a rare combination of functions which he exercised with utmost integrity and commitment. So, in short, rather than treat Gandhi as an ivory tower idealist, Mr. Nazareth has succeeded in depicting him as a man of action, as one of the most successful hands on political leaders of the 20th century. And now, to conclude, let me just say a few personal words about our eminent ambassador and celebrated author. Since A Ringside Seat to History is an amazing autobiography, it certainly reveals quite a lot about the character traits of the man who penned its pages. And first and foremost, his date of birth on the 7th of April 1937 is revealed, from which the following can be deduced. Being born under the zodiac sign of Aries, Alan's personality is characterized by creativity, ambition, and vigor. And his mind is one of his greatest assets, and he uses it to display creativity and charm at any given moment, as testified very magnificently in his narrative. This quality of creativity and charm has earned him many friends throughout his life, including myself. But it is his ambition and vigor that people most admire. And if there is a goal he wishes to achieve, he does all in his power to attain it. And this drive, namely his ambition and vigor, despite great personal tragedies, is the secret of his successful and enriching life, together with Isobel, with whom he'll soon be celebrating their diamond wedding anniversary. May the happy couple be blessed and continue to enthrall all who have the privilege to know and treasure their wonderful friendship. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Professor Dharampal, for speaking so eloquently. Thank you for those remarks. Can I now request Mr. Ashok Malik to please speak? The floor is yours.
Thank you, Ambassador Rao. Thank you, Ambassador Nazareth, for inviting me. And good afternoon, Mr. Voda, Ambassador Srinivasan, and everybody else. Like many of you, I too read the book before it was published. I was fortunate enough to read the manuscript. I thought I'd just skim through it, but frankly, I stayed up late 2 successive nights and finished it in just 2 sittings or readings because it was so fascinating. The book, like all good autobiographies, is just the right mix of insight and anecdotes. And it's written with 2 characteristics that are so typical of Mr. Nazareth: his innate humility, because he does not make himself the center of attention in the book. He lets his stories and insights speak for themselves. And more than that, as Mrs. Rao alluded, like all good diplomats, he is simply fascinated and immerses himself in his host culture. So he offers insights into the various countries he served in that are truly delightful and a great learning experience. As an aside, if I could say that the two attributes or two phenomena really which seem to accompany him through his diplomatic career are a deep faith, because he encounters faith in different countries and in different ways, including meeting Mother Teresa in New York at a very sensitive and emotional time in his life. And along with deep faith, he also seems to encounter military coups more than most of us do. So, which does tell you that Mr. Nazareth has had a range of experiences. Uh, what has been particularly fascinating for me is his experience at the ICCR and in cultural diplomacy, because he was really a pioneer in that. And the work he did at ICCR in putting together the festivals of India, which were huge logistical exercises in the 80s, which he describes, made for great reading and were very, very telling. There's also a funny side to it. Amongst the friends he makes in his years as a cultural administrator, Zubin Mehta, and one day Mr. Nazareth finds himself traveling to Israel, with which India has just sort of begun formal diplomatic relations. He is traveling on a diplomatic passport, which is still an old passport. It doesn't allow him to enter South Africa and Israel. But he does make it to Israel because he figures out that Zubin Mehta is in the country, and Zubin Mehta pulls strings and gets an Indian diplomat into Israel, even though his passport doesn't allow him. And that again, it's a nice story, but it's also telling about how our cultural icons, soft power, if you will, is such an important force multiplier in diplomacy. And this is something Mr. Nazareth recognized years and years ago. The other aspect of the book, which I found fascinating, was insights into Mexico, Ghana, Liberia, especially the interplay between native Liberians and American Liberians, if you will, as well as a delightful set of pages on Mr. Nazareth's visit to Belize, which, as I discovered, and he so eloquently describes, was populated by Indians who is populated by Indians who were descendants of those who'd been sent there after the uprising of 1857. They were sort of exiled to Belize, which is something I didn't know, and that again is fascinating. I met Mr. Nazareth well after he retired in his capacity as a global diplomat and roving ambassador for the Mahatma. And that really has been some of his most meaningful work. He could have settled into retirement, into, perhaps playing bridge in the evening and just reading books, but he did something much more meaningful. He made Gandhi his cause. I can't think of a greater cause. And as I said, I met him because he chose to make me a friend, and which is something I'm humbled by. But it was just by good fortune that I met him and have shared so much with him. And I wish him and his lovely family all the best. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Malik, for those very insightful remarks. I'm wondering if we can establish a connection once again to Lord Parekh. Do we have a connection now to Lord Parekh? I'm afraid the answer seems to be in the negative. So let me briefly sum up the remarks made by our distinguished panelists here today. I think what Ambassador Srinivasan mentioned about Mr. Nazareth's memoir being completely devoid of ego or malice is particularly noteworthy, and something that all of us who have read the memoir would have also made a note of. And his stoic acceptance of all the twists and turns that destiny brought to him, and making the best of every situation, which is, I think, an essential when it comes to being a successful, well-adjusted diplomat. And what Professor Dharampal spoke about the historical backdrop against which most of the events in Ambassador Nazareth's diplomatic life played out as he exercised the craft of diplomacy, his being a man of all seasons at home in the world. I think that summed it up beautifully. And the fact that he embodies and personifies through his life and all the work, not only during his long career, but also post-retirement, the whole concept of the world being our family, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, which is really the motto that all of us in India should live by. That reveals the character and the traits of the author, I think, beautifully. In Mr. Nazareth, as our panelists have pointed out, you see a combination of creativity, ambition, vigor, and charm. All of these combine, all of these elements combine in him and really make him the exceptional individual that he is. As Mr. Malik said, his memoir affords us a right mix of anecdote and delightful insights. There is an innate humility, a range of experience. And I think what interested me also, and Mr. Malik pointed this out, about the way he was able to work through the intricacies of cultural diplomacy. A lot of us tend to dismiss cultural diplomacy as just one adjunct, not so important, of the work in diplomacy. I totally disagree with that kind of belief, because I endorse the view that cultural diplomacy, the utilization of India's soft power, of which we have considerable assets, is a force multiplier in the work that we do. The book itself has delightful anecdotes. Mr. Malik spoke about the issue of, the fact that Ambassador Nazareth could enter Israel without his diplomatic passport, listing Israel as a country to which he could travel through the intercession of Maestro Zubin Mehta. Like that, there are so many interesting and historically, I think, important anecdotes that he lists at page 102 of the memoir. He talks about the signing, a very historical moment, of the Indo-US Joint Commission on Economic, Commercial, Scientific, Technological, Education, and Cultural Cooperation in October 1974. And Mr. Kissinger, who was the signatory from the US side, saying that he could not sign it because the text had a Hindi version, which he didn't understand. Of course, that was said in a lighter vein. But Mr. Y.B. Chavan, who was the foreign minister at the time, turned to Mr. Nazareth and told him that the pen with which he was supposed to sign did not have ink. And then Mr. Nazareth, as a very resourceful person, was able to take out his own pen and hand it to the foreign minister, which is how that agreement was signed. And the photograph lists, I think, some, or at least portrays some of the emotions of that moment. Similarly, I found the anecdote about M.F. Hussain going to China and fracturing his toe and having to return back to Delhi in a day, in 24 hours. And that despite that accident and that mishap, he brought back a whole portfolio of sketches of his 24 hours in China, which he transformed into a whole exhibition of portraits of a China visit. So like that, there are so many such interesting anecdotes. We have some questions from the audience, and one of them is from Mr. Cyril Valiat, who praised that Ambassador Nazareth will tell the audience something about the next book he intends to write. He praised that it will be something to do with Japan. And another question, which I'll bunch together with this one, is from Mr. Ephraim Dovek in Jerusalem, where he talks about the 2 years of common stay that he had with Ambassador Nazareth in Egypt, that he was one of the most popular diplomats in the diplomatic community in Cairo, and that he really personifies the Gandhian spirit, always respecting representatives that he met from various countries and always being able.
First of all, I am so overwhelmed with all that has been said in praise of me and in praise of my book. I don't think I've ever had any day in my life where I have been so praised. So my most heartfelt thanks to all of you. This is a day I will always remember as long as I live, and I'm not very sure how long that will be. Among the questions that have come, I will take the questions, the two questions from my dear friend of many years, Ephraim Dofek. I must say something about him. He arrived in Cairo when India did not have diplomatic relations with Israel, and he asked to call on me. I couldn't call on him. We had already met at receptions in the American embassy and the British embassy, and we immediately sort of took to each other. But I could not accept a formal call on him. So when he asked for the call, I told my secretary, please to tell him that I'm very busy these days. As soon as I have when the call can be scheduled, we'll call back. Well, fortunately, about 3 months later, the establishment of relations came through. I knew sort of it was on its way to some extent. I had urged it from Cairo, making the point that Israel, the largest country in the Arab world, had established relations, had good relations with Israel. And if Egypt can do it, why not India? Anyway, fortunately, it came through. When it came through, I had asked to go to Israel as a pilgrim originally, as a Christian pilgrim, which I have the right to do. MEA said, we are at the point of establishing relations. If you go now, it might become a big story. So please delay it for some time. So when it came through, I had a pleasant surprise. MEA said, now you can not only go, you can go make this an official visit. You go there, you can go in the flag car and go and find out suitable locations for the embassy, chancellery, and the residence. So we decided to go, and dear ambassador made all the arrangements. He sent all the literature on Christian spots in Israel, etc. And he sent my passport to him. The visa was immediately granted. He called the border post. We were going by car, to expect us. We arrived at the border post. Everything seemed fine. We got a warm reception. But after they looked at my passport, the immigration officer came to me and told me very respectfully, sir, you have got a visa. But your passport is stamped that no entry to South Africa, not valid for South Africa and Israel. Now I was amazed, it had not struck me or anyone in my office, nor had it struck the Israeli ambassador to whom the thing had gone. And I had arrived over there. The question was what to do now. And this was a Friday evening. Next day was Saturday, which was a holiday. And we had gone there, just in time for Easter. Now, one of the persons, one of the immigration officer, suddenly asked, would you perchance know Zubin Mehta? I said, yes, I know him very well. In fact, I've known him in London. I was the one who handled his visit to India with the New York Philharmonic. He said, well, then he is the only one who can fix this. So he then got Zubin on the line. Very fortunately for me, he is the younger brother of a violinist in the Israel Philharmonic. So he called Zubin. Zubin came on the line. He said, Alan, I can't believe all the time it was I who came to you. I would lose my passport and you had to come to my rescue. Now I can't believe that the roles are reversed. He said, anyway, give me some time. I'll get back to you in 30 minutes. He got back in 20 minutes. He had called already the foreign minister, who then spoke to the home minister, who then called the immigration officer to say, you let them in. And we were let in. I couldn't believe that. What an amazing thing. Not only that, but Zubin said, all right, I've done this for you now. I'm conducting the Israel Philharmonic tomorrow. You and Isabel must come and join me for dinner after that. And so, as a result of all this sort of mix-up, not only did it become a wonderful story for my autobiography, but we got a wonderful concert and we got a wonderful dinner. It was an absolutely memorable dinner. And I'm telling all this because my Israeli colleague is involved with this. Now, he asked me about how I was such a popular ambassador in Cairo. a simple answer from from Gandhi, who taught us. Always, whenever there is a problem, you always hate the evil, never the evildoer, however great an evildoer he might be, to separate the person from the evil that you confront. Abraham Lincoln had something, there was a lot of similarity between Abraham Lincoln and Gandhi. Abraham Lincoln had put it in a slightly different way. He said the best way to get rid of an enemy is to make him your friend. So that has been my whole approach through life. We diplomats, I believe, are peacemakers. We have got to find ways of bringing peace. It's when the diplomats fail that the generals are called in. That has been my whole approach. And in fact, whenever I arrived in the new embassy, I would tell my officers, particularly in the political section, each of us must try during our 3 years here to bring over at least one harsh critic of India, someone, either a journalist, an editor, a politician, someone in the bureaucracy. Let us focus on that. If each of us can get one person who is not so friendly to India to become a friend, I said we have made a great contribution. That has been my whole approach, and maybe that is why I, as the Israeli ambassador said, was popular. Now, I must also tell an interesting story here about India and Pakistan. The Egyptian foreign secretary, who had been ambassador in India before, came back to Egypt and became foreign secretary. Then at some point, he was appointed foreign minister. So I gave a dinner in his lunch in his honor. When he arrived at my home, he found the only other person waiting there to receive him was the Pakistani ambassador. He was amazed. He said that last week you came and made a long harangue about the Pakistani ambassador, about the Pakistani embassy, about Pakistan. On Monday, he came and did the same about you. And now he said, I come here and I see both of you together, friends. He said, why are you wasting my time? I said, each of us is doing our duty. That doesn't mean to say that we are enemies. In fact, we are trying to make friends with each other so that we then reduce the problems on you. If we become friendlier, maybe we won't call on you so often and trouble you. So he said, he said, Mabruk, congratulations and thank you. So, I mentioned this as a sort of an interesting anecdote and as sort of my basic approach to life. Now, about India and Israel, it is absolutely incredible what has happened in this relationship in the last 30 years. The great distance and coldness that there was. And now Israel certainly is among India's closest friends. But I look upon this relationship in a wider context, not just in terms of India and Israel. I think of when I went to Israel, the main thing which struck me in Jerusalem. We were there for Good Friday services and for Easter. I was so struck by the fact that the three of the sacred places, most sacred sites of the three major religions of the world, are within walking distance of each other in Jerusalem. Absolutely incredible. And the thought struck me that when a day comes when Israel will cease to want to be or cease to claim or strive to be a Jewish state and instead, like India, will become a secular state. It will become the greatest place of pilgrimage in the whole world. And everyone would come there to revive their religious bonds. There will be no other place in the world, no place of pilgrimage in the whole world as great as this. And Jerusalem could be the great center for the creation of human brotherhood and the creation of religious harmony. One thing I would like to say in the same context is that we need to get beyond religion. This is one of Gandhi's great contributions. he raised religion, religion above the level of religion to spirituality. He was a deeply religious Hindu, yet he said, my religion transcends Hinduism. It binds us firmly to the truth. This is what, and by doing so, I believe he made a great contribution. He raised religion above the level of religion to spirituality. Now, spirituality unites people, religion divides. However good it might be, however each one might strive in its religion. I believe that is what we need, and I greatly hope that this dream of mine for Israel will come true and bring India and Israel and the whole world and all of humanity closer together. Now, to answer Reverend Cyril Velay's answer is simple. My next book will be written if and when St. Peter opens the gates of paradise to me, because I'm afraid I will not be able to do it in this world. And writing this autobiography and striving through all these months, then to editing, finding a publisher, and finally getting it published has really taken a lot of my life, certainly taken all the hair out of my head. So no more writing of books on this line, and I much hope that those books I have written will be widely read. But I thank you so much, Reverend Cyril Valaya. You have been such a great support. And it's wonderful to have you all the way from Tokyo sitting in on this. And this for me is an amazing experience. This particular virtual book release webinar is being attended from people all the way from Tokyo to London to Hamilton, the university there, to Los Angeles. For me, it is absolutely incredible what technology has done. Maybe we have to thank COVID for this. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you for those beautifully expressed answers to the various questions that came up on this platform. And I was particularly taken with your reference to the need to elevate religion to spirituality, as Gandhiji did. And it is that truth, I think, that can really set us free. There's one final question, Ambassador, from Kedar Pascal Nazareth, your grandson, who asks, who most influenced your career path and decisions as an ambassador?
Yeah, the person who certainly inspired me the most to aspire for the administrative service was my father. In fact, by the time I finished high school, as a judge, he had been very impressed with the young sub-collectors. You know, he met here the young people, sort of recently out of university, who come. And then those of them who were dynamic were able within a year or two to do so much, build roads, build bridges, build better homes in the slums. He was very impressed and he wanted me to be that. But he wanted me to be an IAS officer. So people would ask me, what do you want to be, young man? Just out of high school, I said, I want to be an IAS officer. So this is what struck me, and all the time I was working on this whole business, and I kept parroting, I wanted to be an IAS officer. This, of course, once got me into serious trouble because I had been admitted to a chemistry honors course in Loyola College. I arrived, and when I arrived, the principal told me to go to the chemistry department. I went to chemistry, a very venerable father, I forget. I think Yellappa or something was the name. So he said that he was very happy I had selected chemistry honors. He found I had very high marks in it. He was very happy. Then he asked me, what do you want to be? I said, I want to be an IAS officer. My God, he just was horrified. He said, no, I don't want you. I'm not here to train people to join the administrative service. No, this is not the type of student I want. Before I could stop him, he called the principal. He said, I don't want this one. He wants to be an IAS officer. So I was then told to go home. I was in a real problem because I had not been admitted to anything else. Then I went and asked the principal. My father came to Loyola College, begged of him. He said, well, I can't promise you anything. Maybe a seat might come up in economics honors. If it does, I'll give it to your son. For 3 weeks, I was hanging, mid-air. I joined the government art college in Coimbatore, where my father was district judge. And then, fortunately, 3 weeks later, the principal said, yes, once the vacancies come up, if your son's interested, he must join tomorrow morning. So that I got the night train and I joined. There. And then finally, I was selected for the IAS and the Foreign Service on my second attempt. I've written about it in my book, how the results I read on a telex machine. And for me, it was amazing, the most exciting moment of my life. An unseen hand sort of writing my name on PASCALALAN. My God, it was the most exciting moment. But having been selected, then I was called for the second interview. That is the Foreign Service interview. My father didn't even want me to go for it. So I told him, Dad, they're calling 3 times the number of vacancies. So let me go. There's a very little chance I'll get it. They're much smarter people than me. And last time I went third class all the way to Delhi and back. This time they're offering me a first class ticket. So let me at least go and have a look at Delhi as on a sightseeing visit. Reluctantly, he agreed. Sadly for him, I was selected for the Foreign Service. And I was told, we were told that if we accept the Foreign Service, we would be invited to tea that same evening with Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, not as Prime Minister, but as Foreign Minister, because he wanted to meet all the young officers. The thought of meeting this great and much loved leader, Prime Minister, was such a wonderful thought. I said, I'm going to accept it. Later on, I can make some excuse and say my parents, have not agreed to this something, but I must have that meeting. So I went there and met him, and I've written about this, the historic moment while he was meeting me. The news of the Dalai Lama crossing over India came in. So then I came back. It was like a house of mourning. They said, you've broken our hearts. We wanted to be here. You will be now somewhere far away. We won't see you. We'll die in your absence. It's all sort of tear-jerking story. So I made an offer. I said, I don't know much about the service. You don't know much about the service. Let's ask someone who knows. So the great arbitrator was a man called Praxi Fernandez, a senior IAS officer in the Karnataka Court. We went to see him. He just asked one question. Alan, you have a choice for the Foreign Service? I said, yes, I have been selected. So what's the question? If I had the choice, I would have taken it. And then he told my parents, don't stand with him. Selecting a service is like marrying a wife. He has to live with it, not you. Let him take it. So they sort of said, what are you saying, Praxi, etc. It was too late. That settled the question. And so I joined the service, the Foreign Service. And looking back, I am really so grateful because I think it's a great service. It's very challenging. It's not easy, but at the same time, it is very, very educated. You learn so much in the service. Also, of course, depending on whom you work under. And so I have learned so much in the service. I think it has made me a much better and a much more mature man, and certainly given me a much wider, broader perspective on the world. Thank you, Kedar, for asking that question. I'm very proud of you, and I feel so happy that at the end you have come in. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Actually, the program lists your concluding remarks now after the Q&A session was over, although there was one last question that just came in for Professor Dharampal. Would you like me to ask her that question?
Yes. If it's on her, I must take it.
All right. Professor, are you online? Can you hear me? Professor Dharampal?
Yes, I'm.
Okay. The question is from Ankit in New Delhi. And he asks, can we imagine a long-term underlying assumption with regard to Pakistan that Pakistan will reorient to South Asia rather than having a West Asia outlook? This is the question from Ankit to you, Professor.
Mhm. Well, it's a very important question indeed, and it's looking into the future. Now, historians try and understand the past, and I think that probably there are people, eminent people on the dais who are more capable of answering this question, and whose response I would also like to hear. So, since the time is short, I would say that I think it. I mean, I think this would be really very important, and Pakistan's orientation towards West Asia has been diminishing over the years, over the decades. From a historical point of view, I can say this, and but the conflictual relationship within South Asia is difficult to negotiate. But perhaps Pascal Alan, Ambassador Nazareth, you would like to respond to this because you have been to Pakistan. I just visited there very briefly, but perhaps you. I think you should. It's your day. It's your day today.
Yeah, I would like very much to respond to that by giving a spectacular example, not so well known, and that example is that of Egypt and Israel. Egypt waged 3 wars against Israel in an attempt to destroy it. Then it found that there was no way because the world would not allow them to destroy tiny Israel. So Sadat decided he was going to try the path of peace instead. He decided to try non-violent conflict resolution. He took the very bold step of flying to Jerusalem. And this bold step, he of course paid for it with his life, but this bold step led to the peace agreement between the two countries. Egypt got back all the territories it had lost. It had lost everything east of the Suez Canal. It got all of them, all of it back without firing a shot. This is the most outstanding example of the success of non-violent conflict resolution. Now, I hope very much that we can bring up some. I know it looks like like a like a like a fool's dream, but nothing is impossible, and that was my effort, where I arranged a visit of 5 retired ambassadors, led by a former distinguished foreign secretary, my mentor, Rasbotra. We spent 7 days there. Not for one moment did we feel we were in an enemy country. The sort of affection we got, the respect. We would go into shops, we would buy a book or we buy some sweets. No one would accept the payment. They said, "You are our guest. How can you come in this country?" There is so much of goodwill at the people's level. Now, how do we mobilize this in some way? What is needed is a breakthrough. And a breakthrough is possible. If it was possible between Egypt and Israel, it is certainly possible between India and Pakistan. We have been flesh of each other's flesh, bone of each other's bone for 3,000 years. All of India's history begins on the banks of the Indus. The Indians are called Hindus because, in fact, we came from the banks of the Indus. Even the word comes from that. So I believe we need to make far more effort. Each side blames the other. There is no doubt that both sides have to take some blame. The same thing with China. We have a serious problem with China, particularly serious today. We can keep on blaming each other, but we can also find out, some way in which we can break through. Also, there have been very, very close bonds over the centuries between China and India. India, in fact, was the Holy Land. People have walked thousands of miles. They are scholars to come to India to learn from India. Now, I know things change, ideologies change, but the people are the same. The people stay the same. When regimes come, you indoctrinate people and you get them to hate one or the other. In fact, a lot of foreign relations can't be conducted unless you create an enemy, an enemy country. Military strategy has to be built around. I believe we need to break away from this. And people need to pay attention to this. I myself am now too old to do all this, but I certainly keep hoping and dreaming that we will make a breakthrough, particularly with India and Pakistan. I hope I have answered the question that has been raised. Now, Ambassador Nirupama, should I make my final concluding remark?
Yes,
Yeah,
please,
good
Ambassador.
evening.
Yes.
Sorry, yes, it's good to receive your phone call. It's just that I'm on a webinar at the moment, and I'll be busy more or less all evening. Could I call you after the 4th?
Sorry, Ambassador. I think, yes, you may proceed with your concluding remarks.
Yeah, my concluding remarks, of course, are I don't know how much of time there.
I think you will have about 7 minutes or so, I think.
Yeah, well, I had wanted to thank everyone personally by name for all those who have contributed to make this day possible. To make, first of all, the book possible, starting maybe with my son, but for all his nagging me, which went on to stop, which finally I decided to begin to write this on my 80th birthday. And a whole lot of people thereafter have helped, my daughter, my grandson, all begging in, my dear sweet wife, Isabel, who helped me in every way, trying to recall dates, finding old diaries, something, and a whole lot of others whom I had short of time I can't all mention. But I must especially mention my colleague, friend, and great supporter, Narendra Vora, President Chairman of IIC, who has been such a friend right through. He was a great tease when we were in the academy together. He used to call me Masala Dosa Alan, because I used to be very fond of South Indian food. But right through, he has been so supportive, and amazingly for me, someone who was Defense Secretary, Home Secretary, and all this. When he retired, and I set up Sarvodaya International Trust and asked him to be chairman to start the New Delhi chapter, he started it, and then he built it up in incredible. And all the others who have made this day possible. A very special thank you to dear Ambassador T.P. Srinivasan. He has discounted his role in this. But if it was not for this marriage, the marriage he had made for me with Konark, this book would never have been done. That was my last sort of effort. 2 publishers had turned me down already. And I must also mention, it was his idea to put my Facebook picture on this. It's a cross that never struck me at all. But now I suddenly find that this has been its main attraction. Someone asked me, why didn't you put your present picture? I said, simple answer, if I put my present picture on this, no one would have got the book. So that picture has got something captivating about it. A whole lot of people have commented on it. He said that it makes me an icon of composure and a man completely at peace with himself. I certainly feel happy. And he has also written such a wonderful review of the book. I can never thank him sufficiently. And Mr. Nair for having not only agreed to publish the book, the whole process just took 33 days. The first publisher kept my book for 7 months, and at the end of it said he couldn't publish it. Here it took only 7 days. In the meantime, they made a completely, thoroughly professional assessment of the book. And he has got the most outstanding people working for him. I must especially mention 3 of them, Jija Joy, Ranjana Narayan, and Misha Oberoi, who's the designer of the book. I've dealt with, because of all the books published abroad, I've dealt with more than 30 publishers all over the world. Truly, I have not come across anyone as efficient, as responsive, and as what shall I say, clued up about their business as this. my most sincere thanks to them. As I have told, Mr. Nair, the three of them that I mentioned converted my rough diamond of a manuscript into a really well cut, highly polished crown jewel. I owe it to them, and I can never really thank them sufficiently for it, because they did an outstanding job. And all this, mind you, within a 4-month period, with the COVID with the COVID pandemic on, working from home in most of the time. How they manage to coordinate with each other is amazing. I think Mr. Nair is some sort of a magician, I must say, more than a publisher. So I'm deeply grateful to him. I must, maybe because of lack of time, mention this, but I cannot end again without mentioning one very, very special person, and that is former Foreign Secretary Raspotra. He has been so kind to me and my wife. And if I'm not mistaken, he's present at this meeting. He told me he was going to attend it. He won't say a word, but he would attend it just to listen to what the others are saying. He was the one who made the first reading of my manuscript. The first editing was done by him, suggesting what I leave out and what I might expand. So I can never really thank him sufficiently. God bless him and long may he live.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all very, very much again, and you particularly, Ambassador Nirupama Rao. You have handled this, moderated the session. All your comments have been so elegant, so erudite, so insightful. I'm so, so proud of you. And I must tell all my audience, she's not only a great foreign secretary, she's also an opera singer. Not many of you might know it. And since I'm an addict to opera, I love her very much. Even just from that score. And she has set up a whole orchestra. Not many of you know, it's called the South Asia Symphony Orchestra. Bringing another effort to bring people of all this, of our subcontinent together through music. Well, and what she has achieved in just 18 months is absolutely incredible. We have to be so, so proud of her. And I feel very honored and privileged that she kindly agreed to moderate this session. Many, many thanks, Nirupam.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm really overwhelmed by your kindness. I know that Mr. K.N. Srivastava, the director of the India International Center, was supposed to speak at the beginning of this function, but that couldn't happen for technical reasons. So K.N., would you like to say a few words?
No, ma'am, thank you so much. It was such a great pleasure seeing you and Ambassador Nazareth on the screen today. I always cherish my working with you in the foreign ministry. And I also remember my meeting with Ambassador Nazareth when he was serving as Consul General of India at Newark in 1987, where I had gone there with Mr. Natwas to attend the UNGA. Thank you very much, sir. And certainly would like that association with IAC should continue. And we are looking forward to seeing more and more books being penned by you in the near future. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for those gracious remarks, Ken. Can I request Mr. KPR Nair to offer a vote of thanks? And that will conclude our session for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Nirupamaji. Good evening to one and all. Today's launch of A Ringside Seat to History is truly a momentous occasion for Konark Publishers, as it marks the culmination of a beautiful journey that we started almost an year ago with Ambassador Nazareth. It was Ambassador T.P. Srinivasan who first introduced me to Ambassador Nazareth, and it was at the IAC that our first meeting took place. By then, I had already skimmed through the manuscript and knew that it is a book that I would want to publish. It is not every day that you come across a book that speaks about the many important events in world history in an engaging manner. As a reader and publisher, the manuscript immediately made a connect with me, and I decided to carry the agreement to our very first meeting. Ambassador Nazareth was pleasantly surprised when I gave him the agreement, skipping the many steps that usually precede the signing of the agreement.
Can expand my screen to Sushma, where I go.
But he was very happy to oblige, and from there started the journey of this book. It was a joy to work with the author, who had an abundance of energy and who kept us going even during the multiple periods of lockdown. Bringing out this book during a pandemic was definitely a challenging task, but as he mentioned in his concluding remarks, that we, Konark team, enjoyed always our work with passion. Therefore, the efforts were all worth it. I congratulate Ambassador Nazareth on the launch for this book and thank him for choosing Konark as his publisher. It was a pleasure working with him on this project. Moving on, I would like to thank Sri N.N. Vora, President, India International Center, for his kind words. IAC hosting this event is indeed an honor for Konark. Though, when I started my publishing house in 1987, I chose to publish two institutions to become my source of inspiration and publishing journey. That was India International Center. I published many books created by India International Center. They were looking for a professional publisher. And the other one was Center for Policy Research, which was headed by Dr. Pai Panatkar and many stalwarts like Dr. Amrit Singh, Sri A.P. Venkateswaran, and Sri Pran Chopra, and so many others. Next, I would like to thank Ambassador Nirupama Rao for taking the time out to be part of this event and sharing her pertinent observations on the book. I remember having missed her as my author. If I remember correctly, she had a manuscript of her poetry. I think I don't remember it. Maybe it was a decade plus, ago. But somehow I missed that opportunity. I hope I will have another opportunity. Thank you, Mrs. Rao. I thank Lord Bhikkhu Parekh, Member of Parliament, United Kingdom, for gracing the launch with your presence and for the insightful thoughts that you shared with all of us. Next is the man who made this launch possible, Ambassador T.P. Srinivasan. I thank you for the immense support that you have extended to Ambassador Nazareth as well as to Konark throughout the publishing process. We greatly appreciate all the efforts that you have put in and hope for your continued guidance in the future as well. I thank Mr. Ashok Malik for agreeing to be part of this launch and for the valuable observations you have made. I also thank Dr. Geeta Dharampal, who has joined us all the way from Germany, if I'm right. I thank you for your thoughts, ma'am. It was a pleasure listening to your talk. As I mentioned before, it is indeed an honor to be involved with this event with the IAC. I thank Mr. K.N. Srivastava, Director, IAC, Mrs. Usha Mazumdar, for all the support that they extended to us to ensure a glitch-free event during this pandemic times. Also for the technical staff of IAC who helped us in making this program possible. Last but not the least, I thank each and every one of you who stayed with us till the end of this event, patiently listening to all the speakers. I hope you will all grab a copy of this interesting book whenever you get an opportunity. The book is already available almost all over in India. The Kindle edition is also available. It's going to be available in another day or two in about 16 countries. This is for the information of those who would like to have a Kindle edition. Once again, I thank one and all for taking the time out and being part of this launch. Thank you.
That brings us to the end of this session.
Other people will see it.
Thank you once again, and good night.
Good night.
Thank you very much indeed.
Seen by others. The
Thank you.